everyone. Welcome to your next episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your hosts, Laura Matsu, myself, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. So, this podcast, we're going to be getting into the topic of scarcity consciousness and the true meaning of abundance. And especially in spiritual communities, I think this is a very hot topic because there's so many distortions around it. And there's also just so many core beliefs that we hold about money that I think get projected into our world. And, it's very true that money can be the root of all evil, but I feel it's more actually the love of money and the desire for money and power over other things in life that can actually be harmful. But I've also noticed that in spiritual communities, it's really just like the right brain and the left brain can't work well together. Because to me, money is like a very left-brained thing that takes a lot of organizing, a lot of attention to detail. And it's really about just understanding that the left brain and the right brain can work in cohesion. And money is just basically a skill to be learned like any other language, it's financial literacy. That's what they call it. So myself and Bernhard have definitely been getting into this topic lately because we have a lot of right brain action happening in our lives, a lot of creativity, a lot of, emotional intelligence, I guess you could say. But then sometimes a lot of people who have this more right-brained way of being can have an underdeveloped left brain way of being. And I know for myself, that's been my own learning recently. So we just have kind of a lot of personal conversations around this topic lately. So it makes it really interesting for us. Also on the forum, if you're listening to this podcast, we have the second hour of the podcast and also a membership forum. We had a whole thread about, I think they called poverty consciousness though. And we specifically didn't say that this was about poverty consciousness because that's a whole other topic in myself. Scarcity is more about, not feeling like there's enough in the world to go around. And then abundance is like understanding that there's a lot to go around and seeing this abundance everywhere and that, we're very provided for in that sense. So even though we're not just referring to money as in abundance as money, we're going to talk about that topic to begin with because money and currency is just how we trade in the Western world, all over the world rather. And, you could go, for myself, I lived in an intentional community, an eco-village type community, but there's still the presence of money. So it's not something that myself personally, I think I'm going to get away from in this lifetime, nor should I think we should. So what are your kind of ideas about money?
Yeah, out of personal experience, we can see in our own lives. And I feel mostly there are two extremes of that topic, like almost like black and white. Either people fall very much into the love for money, the greed and materialism and more is better and all of that. How can I make more money, more? Mm-hmm. And then the opposite side of the coin when, the quote unquote a distorted spiritual view that money is evil, materialism is evil. It's almost the equation of you need to be poor, walk in the cloth, have no possessions in order to become self-realized, enlightened, unite with God and all of that. Yeah. So these two extreme poles, and then you have these forces of the matrix, which money ties also into money, wealth and power and sex.
Yeah.
So money, sex and power. And that's what the matrix is almost based on. And that's why many spiritual edition, they preach the aesthetic life, to reject all of that, to, reject the material world, to not have any ego ambitions, no power, no sex, the whole almost distorted form of celibacy, of suppression of sexual desires, and also of money. Like money is evil, like don't get sucked into the greed. And so all of this needs to be rejected.
And a lot of hippie communities that I've, that's what I kind of fell into. I was like, I wanted to work in the gift economy for a while. I tried that, didn't work out very well. That's what I felt. I was like, I'm just going to abandon.
Exactly. I think at first I can see this myself because I used to also reject money, like money is evil, rich people are evil, all of that. It's very generalized. And I think it comes from a well-meaning place because because we see the world, how much damage all this greed, this materialism has done. So we want to find another way, but reject it. We throw the baby out with the bathwater and don't see that there might be a different way. And I really liked, Sri Aurobindo from Integral Yoga talked about these forces, the wealth, which is money, sex, and power, and how the Azuric forces, the occult forces, have hijacked it, working through people and just, feeding the ego, the lower vital, the lower nature, and all of that. And then the reaction from the spiritual perspective to reject all that, but then you hand it actually over to the Azuric forces. It just goes more rampant. So we need to bring the power back, not to our own egoic, quote unquote selfish desires, but to make it in the service of the divine. And when we talk about that, we need to also basically talk about what is money, what is abundance. What you also referred to is money actually this material thing, these dollar notes or whatever's the number on your bank account digitally, whatever.
Yeah. And
like you mentioned before, it's just a currency. It's just what we have agreed upon for trade.
Yeah.
As an exchange. And then we look into that, then you realize that money in itself is just energy. And that's
money is fuel. Remember that
exactly.
That's what on this podcast.
That's what I just mentioned, because we all hear about, the spiritual money is just energy, and then, a lot of spiritual people, myself included, we throw this around. Money is just energy. It's just exchange. But you can go even deeper than that. We listened to this very interesting podcast, with this man.
The Art of Money.
The Art of Money. Which is really good, by the way, Laura and I have been reading that book.
Yeah, because she's a somatic psychologist, but then now she calls herself a financial therapist. So she really takes in this more both spiritual and body-based approach. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, her name is Barry Tesler. The book is The Art of Money, because most of you think of money like all, the self-help that's out there is how to make more money, think rich, grow rich, the distortion of the secret, just think positive thought, imagine the checks coming in your bank account. But, it's not too much about how to get more money. It's just like, what is our relationship to money? What is the role? How has the matrix distorted it? Our own belief systems, our shame around it, our upbringing, our karma, all of that, the more embodied approach.
Yeah, and also not even just seeing abundance in the form of money, although that's important, but also, just seeing abundance in every aspect of your life. Like I remember when I was working on a permaculture farm and we would harvest all the vegetables for that season, I would look at it and I'd be like, wow, I would just think in my mind, like, you can't buy vegetables like this in the grocery store, To me, that was like a truly abundant moment. And also this abundance can show up in all aspects in our lives. And I know of people who have a lot of like financial, quote unquote, like wealth or resources, but they live in a state of scarcity consciousness. So I really also want to make this distinction that it's actually not so much about how much money you have, but how abundant your life is in general.
Exactly. And abundance truly means, like you made a good example working, nature is abundant.
Yeah.
It provides. And abundance, many people mistake just money for abundance alone. That's not abundance. Abundance means also relates to, being spiritual. The word spiritus means actually energetic, alive, feeling passion for life, being fully tuned in. And that's what you see in nature as well. It's alive, it's creating, right? And so abundance is just also it goes way beyond the material collection of dollar notes or this hoarding, because that's what it has turned into, hoarding of money. And that's how the matrix works. Especially you look into the matrix control system, the bank and families, the Rothschilds, there's definitely this hoarding of power and money, and keeping people in poverty on purpose and all of that. But it's easy to fall, of course, we can blame the matrix, the government, the banking institutions, the debt system and all of that, taxation, for the poverty in the world. But what they really do, they use our own program. They have programmed us, our unconscious guilt and shame around money, these beliefs against us. So, what I mean? So we almost recreate that.
Well, this is also something I learned recently from a totally different person, from a trauma therapist about, he talks about basically multiple people in the Semitic community talks about how basically like the birth of agriculture really destroyed us as a social structure, because once it became about how many resources that we could obtain, we became in competition with the people around us rather than gathering together in a tribal element. You know, we would basically go away to hunt and then we would come back to the tribe. But now it's like every man for himself, whoever can whoever can collect more resources, and that's what we see as money, becomes more powerful. And this has basically put us in competition against each other. It's put us to fear the other person, because it's literally been like our wiring has been our DNA. I mean, we can even go further back. This probably happened even before this, but has been wired in the way that's opposite for us to, you know, evolve, because we cannot, you know, we evolve better if we do it collectively rather than individualistically. And so that's kind of this wiring that we've gotten into, this capitalistic greed. I'm competing against you. If I have more, you have less. That's an actual reality that's been integrated into the world. But the fact is that I feel on a basic biological level, we're actually meant to join with each other and to not compete, to see what the other person can contribute to us, you know, and to build these kind of communities. I think this is going to be maybe something more that happens in this Pluto and Aquarius kind of time. Pluto being this area of transformation and Aquarius being about the collective and the community. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still, you know, competing against each other and seeing other people, even in our neighborhood, as our enemy. And I even remember just a shift happening within my lifetime. Like, I'm in my 30s now. And when I grew up, it was a smaller like town. I could knock on any of my neighbor's house on my block, and even the 2 blocks around me, and ask them for something, you know, just to borrow or whatever, or just to visit them. And now I see this is not the reality anymore. I don't know what it's like in the small town that I grew up in, but, you know, you're like, I've literally had neighbors who were my enemy, you know, and that's like, and to me, this is also kind of this dissolving of, like, the more that we're competing against each other, the more we're going to be in scarcity consciousness as well.
And that's how the Azuric forces work, who have hijacked power, wealth, and money. Mm-hmm. Power, wealth, and sex as well. It's this ego consciousness. And what you mentioned, the trap of competition. And you might say that competition serves its purpose, so better products, better services, like healthy competition, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But it gets very distorted if you really, you know, there's a lot of corruption because of that. Then in the end of the day, more for me, less for others. You know, the trap of competition ties also into the trap of comparison. Mm-hmm. And the matrix trap is just doing things for the sake of money, right? Yeah. To just make money, like it's just driven by the desire to have more money. Yeah. And I can tell you right away, in my profession, the body work, I've, you know, over the past 20 years worked at various retreats and very quote unquote high-end clients, very rich, very sometimes famous people, whatever, who have all that, but they're definitely not happy or fulfilled. In fact, there's a lot of, you know, money does by itself, it certainly doesn't bring you happiness. And I agree with what you mentioned before. Even somebody a multi-millionaire billionaire can live in scarcity consciousness. Yes. Of just hoarding on, more for me, less for others. And that's also the matrix trap, because money in itself, it's this energy. It needs to circulate like a life force, mm-hmm. right? And that's the irony. The more you actually also truly invest or spend. Invest, I don't mean in like stocks or what, but invest in life, into yourself, the more you will receive. But the key ingredient is really to put it into something that's really aligned with who you truly are. And
your values. Exactly. Because, for example, like I did go into debt the past few years. I'm not in debt anymore, but I was spending it on books, on courses, on my yoga teacher training, also on traveling. You know, all of these things were, and not just traveling just for fun to go to the Bahamas and have a vacation, like traveling to expand my awareness of the world. And then ultimately, this is like the way that I kind of justified it was like, okay, I'm investing, you know, people spend $80,000 to $100,000 or whatever. I don't know how much student loans are because I don't have one, but they spend that much on their student loans. I'm going to be a student of life, and this is what I'm going to spend it on.
That's a matrix trap in itself, the student loans.
Yeah, exactly.
And then keep people in debt.
And not only that, but then you have this like master's degree in this very specific thing, and you have to go in this very specific career. There isn't enough jobs or whatever. So I was just basically like, okay, I'm going to consciously go in debt to serve my own education, because I could tell that, like, you know, the level of skills that I had and based on what I wanted to do, there was a discrepancy. But yeah, so like, it's also not, but I could also tell, like, at the same time that, you know, once you go into debt, it does affect your consciousness. Maybe that's just me, but it did affect because I was always paying it off. You know, I could never get ahead. You're always, you know, a lot of financial, you know, basic financial advice is that you should always have like at least 3 to 6 months or more of money in case something happens to you. As long as you're in debt, that's actually not happening. So you are living from paycheck to paycheck, even worse, you know?
Yeah, that's a sketchy thing with debt, because that's how the matrix works as well. The debt consciousness to put us into debt on purpose. And there are metaphysical repercussions too, because if you use credit, debt, and all, get yourself in debt, you're paying with something you haven't earned, right? And that's how they trap you, even metaphysically, karmically, right?
Yeah.
Because not through your own efforts. You know, ideally, you don't want to spend money you don't have. Having said that, like you mentioned, you can use the matrix with the debt setup, with a, you know, credit setup to your own purpose. Like, that's what I mean. You use the matrix rules through your own advantage without getting trapped in it, swallowed up in it. You know, for example, you know, when I was in my 20s as a musician, I used building credit slowly. I got into debt to have a music studio, right? Just to pay for equipment and all of that, to invest into that, but also be clear that I'm able to pay it off, not to like go overboard with that. Yeah. And similar to you, I've also, when I started out, you know, in my life, everybody's different, but I know I could never relate, even when I was straight out of high school. I remember going back to college days, you know, I've mentioned that maybe before in the podcast, but I went to business school, you know, studying economics and business. The only reason I went to is because everybody else was doing this, pressure from my parents, and this idea, you know, life is about making money, career, so I need to learn business and economics. I was lost. I had no passion.
But interestingly, I think that learning business could be an important...
Exactly, but let me just, you know, but my point is, like, you get out of school, you don't even know yourself, you know, as a young kid.
Exactly.
So I had to like find, you know, it's about finding your calling in life first, right? Follow your bliss, your passion, your deeper, you know, quote unquote soul purpose, or something that really excites you. And that pursue that, and then trusting that the money will come out of that. We have turned it around. Most people, you know, look for money first and then think they need a certain amount of money before they can actually do something that fulfills them, or even wait for retirement, this dangling carrot all the time, right? And what I've noticed, as long as I've followed that inner call of what I'm really excited about, then actually the universe supported me. And similar to you, I never saved money until I was in my 40s, literally. I spent everything back into my own education, books, workshops, retreats. I went, you know, what I learned, body work, massage at Esalen. I spent easily over $10,000, and I didn't really have the money. It was mostly, you know, living month to month. But I noticed the more I invest into myself, the more I would come back. Yeah. Around like opportunities, or, you know,
but make the distinction that investing in yourself is not just investing in like nice clothes or whatever. You're investing into your soul purpose.
Soul purpose, more in experiences, not stuff. Yeah. You know, just, you know, taking education into my own hand.
Exactly.
And I realized I need to like also pay for that, pay with yourself, or like to have the means to do that and not expect anything to be handed for me over for free.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the era that we're heading into, because I feel that we've, you know, seen, at least many people listening to this podcast have seen that the educational system is basically a failure at this point, and they're struggling to keep up. And now what we have is like all this online learning happening, which for myself, like I had so many issues, like just sitting in a chair for hours and like being talked down to by teachers. I struggled in school so much, and it wasn't because I was smart. It was because it was a natural rebellion against the system. And there's going to be many people people out there who aren't able to fit into these confines, and you basically have to be like a student of life and and make the world your school, and now you have all these kids getting raised like unschooling and being, I forget what it's called, but children who like travel the world as part of their schooling. And I think this is more the direction that we're going into, because like not only that, like the way that we teach people to learn so that they can gain skills to have a career is like sit in a classroom and read and take tests. Like that's only one learning style that they're really catering to, and a lot of people are in different ways. But
yeah, we know that's how the Matrix works through the educational program. It's literally a program to tell people how to think. It's very generalized. It's not individualized. It's not helping to explore the individual. What is this person good as an individual, and bring that out?
Yeah.
Right. It's just forming people into trying to fit them into the system. Yeah.
And that's what people are struggling against when they're like, oh, I can't because, I need to keep this job before I do this and that. And not saying that, there's a certain level of security that you might need, but a lot of that is also, I've noticed, just programming and lies that they're telling themselves. And, I know that I'm comfortable taking risks. So I did take a huge risk when I did what I did. But I also knew just from life experience that when I was following something I was truly passionate about, that's when it was going to work out. Because I tried the other avenues. Like I did go to college and I learned community welfare. I tried to go to, it's interesting, even though I was already, like as a teenager, I was already writing as a journalist. I then tried to take classes in journalism. I was like, no, like I just got to trust the fact that if I want to do something, I can do it and figure it out. And now more than ever, we actually live in a world where you can do that. Like even I remember when I wanted to go to school, I was like, oh, maybe I should get like a master's in psychology or something. But no, actually working as a holistic life coach gives me way more freedom than if I went down that path, because now I can be like, I can literally learn a modality in like, a month, and then I can start applying it. If I was operating under these matrix programs with these like certificates and whatnot, I actually wouldn't have that freedom. I do think there's another side of the coin though. We have a lot of people who are like now posing as like professionals who actually don't know what they're doing, but that's a whole other topic. But what I'm trying to say is like, this abundance, when we go after, anything that creates more life force in us, and we're able to distinguish like what makes me feel more alive, that's when we're generating exactly the energy to generate abundance, because that's actually what creates abundance in the world, and that's what creates abundance within our own lives. Exactly.
Maybe let's talk about from a practical perspective, what is in the way of the flow and in a way of creating abundance. And many, many different factors come in on a multidimensional level. There's even karmic considerations and all of that, the law of cause and effect. Mm-hmm. But on the very basic level, we don't question our core beliefs. Many beliefs we not be aware of, but they're unconscious. Matrix programming. One we mentioned before, we feel money is evil, money is dirty, rich people are evil. So hence, if I get money, I become evil as well. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that a lot of rich people are, they're psychopaths there. They're very entitled. They're very selfish. But I know, having worked with many individuals who are very, very well off, it actually helped me to pierce through the program that all rich people are evil. Some of them are very conscious, aware they are where they're at. They have their own emotional struggles, issues. Money alone doesn't resolve it. And so we need to watch out not to generalize it, because that's how the Matrix that's the irony how the Matrix works. They want us actually to think, the 2% is in our control, money is evil, the evil rich and all of that, and then gets us in the trap of the revolutionary mind.
Well, disempowerment is really,
exactly, ultimately disempowering our own inherent creative potential, because we project outward, we blame the world, we blame the elite, the Rothschilds and all of that.
Yeah, and then we're like, oh, I'm not going to use PayPal because I don't want to pay any fees and whatnot, and all these things.
I'm sorry, that's may trigger, but this unnecessary self-defeating quote-unquote activism.
Yeah. Right? You're making actually, and this kind of leads into it, you're making life harder for yourself, like as much as like, I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk at all, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to use PayPal, because that allows people to pay me really quickly. And I know, so some points I just need to make a choice. Is this gonna help people? Is this gonna help me help people, or is it not gonna help people?
That's a very important point, because ultimately, if you're more spiritual, how can I have the biggest impact to help others to spread awareness? And Tom Montauk, he wrote an excellent article on his website, ties into that, increasing your potential to help others. And he addressed the topic of like, somebody asked him a question that, I don't want to do any damage to the world, and the world is corrupt and evil. I just want to live off the grid, be away from everyone, but to do that, you have to like become very self-involved.
Yeah.
It's just about yourself, and keeping that lifestyle up. It's insane almost.
Well, and not only that, like this is like the common millennial fantasy now. It's like, oh, I'm going to move, just grow my own food. And when I break it down to people, I'd be like, do you realize how good of a farmer and how much land you have to grow your own food, where you're just eating your own food? Because it's not like, it's like, people think that they can just like, oh, I'm just going to plant some seeds and I'm just going to water them, and then every day I'm going to have vegetables. But no, in order to actually grow enough food for just yourself, first off, one man, or one woman doesn't have the time of day to do it on your own. But it's just, not only that, do you want to be a farmer for the rest of your life too? Like, because that's going to be your life. And if you want to dedicate yourself to that. So it's also, like getting, because I know this because I actually had that visualization, and I was like, okay, I'm going to move to a permaculture farm and learn how to grow my own food. And I did have fun in the garden at first, but then eventually I was like, this is not where my talents lie.
That you make a great point, because many people are actually very talented, drawn to tourist type people, maybe, living in nature, growing food and have that life. But we need to acknowledge that we have all different qualities. I know for myself, I don't really have, for example, what you call a green thumb.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm good many other ways I can help others. So you need to know yourself, honor where you are. And also, a true STO, society service to others, is everybody's doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And if you're truly aligned with your inherent God-given talents, everybody can do something somebody else is not able to do.
Exactly.
So it's your unique expression that cancels out any form of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Competition comes up when you're actually insecure, not aligned with who you are, and try to,
it comes from scarcity.
It comes from scarcity. And actually, that ties also into a big unconscious program, which many of us have, myself included, especially in the past, which is in the way of creating abundance on our level, is meaning I'm not good enough because I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Because what does it relate to? Any possible childhood trauma, or what have been told through society or upbringing and whatnot, the I'm not good enough program. So if you're not good enough, you don't deserve, right? So that expresses yourself in your ability to create abundance, to quote unquote attract money and all of that, because of these inherent beliefs. And it's not that, you have these superficial ways of attracted, what the people call the law of attraction, like The Secret, of just like thinking positive thoughts, visualizing that and this. But especially the film The Secret is very materialistic, based on stuff. Again, so you can easily get into the greed. So, going back to money is energy, money is fuel. I like that what Barry Tesler said, that money is fuel in a sense, giving you the resources to do what you can do best, to be a better of service, to help others. So if you move into the woods, like Tom Montag wrote, how are you going to help others, like with your talents and all of that? So you got to also see the matrix not so black and white, because within the matrix, there are assisting forces as well.
Yeah.
For example, we all know taxation is theft and all of that, the corruption of the system and all of that. But if I would try to just live under the radar all the time, I would spend so much time doing that. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing to help others, to this podcast and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right. So, we need to also sometimes, what Esoterica said in Gnosis, feed the crocodiles to keep them, calm, so to speak, to be very wise with strategy, and then don't have these extreme views, this black and white thinking, externalizing of all this, these forces are evil. So we need to reject all of that and then throw out the baby with the bathwater, especially when it comes to money and abundance.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really all about your attitude towards money and what your values are. And then I also want to remark just really quickly that it also shows up in the astrology chart quite frequently, what I've seen. Like, I don't know anyone who's very well off financially who doesn't have some strong second house placements. Like, I've seen it quite a few times. So maybe you were super rich in a past lifetime, and this lifetime you need to learn how to live more simply or something. Like, who knows? Like, we all also have different soul lessons as well. But, I think that I've just known from my experience when I was, I think that there's a certain level of comfort, not too much, but not too little, that you need in order to also engage in spiritual work. Just on a basic, some people may disagree with me, because if you're in basic survival mode, like not sure how you're going to feed yourself or whatever, and I even know because I was in that mode, there's only a certain amount of spiritual work that you can do because you don't have that space, you're to take it on as well. So this is also this is also why it's really important. And I just also want to remark on something you said earlier too about escaping the world. The world is actually giving us all the material that we need in order to evolve. So the more that we want to actually escape from the world, the more that we're actually probably not wanting to face our lessons. Because like I've heard this from multiple Buddhist teachers that, you could go easily become enlightened on a mountain or out in nature, but you're true. Like if you really committed to being a bodhisattva, go in the middle of the city and try and practice. So this is also a whole other thing about just escaping the world. It's usually seen as, I honestly feel like it's just an escape plan, personally.
Exactly, the distortion of spirituality. And what you just mentioned was interesting, to basically being able to exist in physical reality with a foundation before engaging in spiritual work, which is very interesting. Actually, Gurdjieff, I remember, mentioned that he would only accept students who already have mastered the physical reality, being able to take care of yourself, have an income, in all of that on the basic foundational level before engaging into the higher work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I've even had, like, at this point in my, I guess, like, career, even though I don't like that word. In this case, whatever state I'm at as far as, like, my career. I'm just going to use that word. I don't know why I'm triggered by it. But in this point in my career, I've had people come to me and be like, oh, do you do sliding scale or whatever? And I'm like, no, my rates are actually exactly what I think is fair. And if you can't afford them right now, then I'm sorry, I don't offer that. Maybe in the future, once I have a lot of things going on, I'll start offering like scholarships and, free, depending on people who apply, I can offer free work for people. But at this point, I just don't have the ability to do that. I'm like trying to hustle still to make a living and an income. So, and in the past, I used to be different, but it didn't work out for me. I'd be like, oh, I will trade you, or, because it was all coming from these self-worth issues. And I also suffered from like imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I to make money doing this when there's people who go to school and do this or whatever? That was my belief system. And it took me a while to actually see the value of what I was doing and appreciate the value of what I was doing. And then also, relating to astrology, it's actually my North Node is in Taurus. So it's actually my soul lesson to understand the material world. And this is not just to get money for the sake of money, which is not a Taurus lesson, but to understand the value, like the creative value, the appreciation of a beautiful thing. Like that's actually part of my own soul lesson. And you can see that's very alien to me because I'm used to kind of functioning in chaos and destruction. That's my comfort zone. And now I have to learn security. And this basic level of security is actually what we need in order to engage in this kind of work. Because, as I said before, if you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills or whatever, then how are you going to have the extra emotional space to really dive deep into stuff? Yeah.
Oh, well, you touch upon very many points that are good. We need to get into. Number one, you said we noticed that topic come up because we have a thread on the forum, on the membership forum called exactly the poverty conscious. It's 4 or 5 pages, a lot of good insights from various people. Tom Montauk posted it on there as well. I also recommend his article, Opening the Flow. But I remember because you started the thread on the forum and because it was based when we started a membership section.
Oh, I started that thread?
You started that. Exactly. That was early on because I remember when I stepped, with my work, people, piercing the veil of reality, the amount of the articles on the videos and all of that, there's tons of free content, right? And then also through my own work, similar to I hear the calling, so offering sessions, certain material. I put a lot of my webinars, put a lot of time and energy and research into it, all of that. And ask for an exchange,
Yeah.
But then especially I noticed in the so-called truth movement, people got on my case, on our case, like, attacking me for charging, a couple $100 for an 8-hour webinar, right? Like that there's this entitlement almost that these things should be for free, or that I'm greedy, or that's in it for the money. All these projections, which also tag into my own wounds,
But
so I want to, let me just finish. And then
like wanting to defend you.
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. And then I remember even when we started the membership, people were complaining of $11 a month. And like, if you cannot contribute $11 a month for the for people don't even know how much work it takes for the podcast, to the website, keeping up with the forum and all of that, the time you put into and just contribute in that sense. If you don't have that, then it's time to reflect. If you have spent time to spend, only 1 hour on Facebook a month, but cannot spend $11, then you may get off Facebook and find ways with your creativity to have more income. Yeah,
and people don't realize that's the thing, is they're giving Facebook their money through giving Facebook their time. So your time is actually your money as well.
Mark Hansen wrote about, that's the new currency, attention.
Yes.
The attention currency, to vector away your attention. So where's your attention every day? What do you do with your time? And there's a saying, time is money, which is also somewhat a matrix program, but it's also like, we become more consumers, consuming content all the time, which is fine. But then I've noticed in this younger generation, especially with this information overload on the internet, and you can Google anything, and there's a lot of quote unquote free content, and that's great. That's awesome. But along with it comes this entitlement that everything should be free.
But there isn't a lot of free quality content. That's the distinction,
true.
Like you could be like, oh, I'm not going to buy this book because I can Google and find it on YouTube. Yeah, maybe you could after hours of research, but why not get a book that has all of the things that you want for, an extra $25 or whatever. So that's the thing, is like, and not only that, is this idea of free, this idea of free for starters is not even true, because, what Gurdjieff says is like, you don't get anything for free. You have to pay with yourself in some way. So you have to give up, especially in spiritual work. I think Tom Montauk mentioned this on the forum, is you're going to have to give up some part of yourself in order to engage in the work to begin with. And that's what, are you going to read that post?
Exactly. Because regarding what we talked about, so here I'm quoting Tom from the forum on the poverty conscious post, because exactly what we talked about, people not wanting to pay for knowledge, for services that might help them, which I see, like I mentioned before, they fall into the trap. They feel that if they pay something, it's just they're only giving, nothing's coming back, and they don't understand the universal law that by spending it, by investing it, will actually come back around. And you will benefit in multiple different ways.
I think there's just before you read that quote, though, I think there's multiple things happening there. Number one, what we talked about earlier is, I know people in my family who have money but don't want to, pay for things on themselves, don't want to treat themselves to massages and whatnot, is because they don't feel that they're worth it, but then, so there's one aspect of it. And then also, I think that people who also, what my view is somebody contacts me and they're like, oh, I want to book a session or whatever, and they don't actually do it. It's like, you must not want it that bad.
Yeah, exactly. So here Tom writes, if someone's really hungry for knowledge, guidance, training, etc., they gladly pay for it proportional to the value they perceive. One problem is that some people are so ego attached that they feel they're already paying enough and having to suffer through the giving up their precious attachments in order to listen to spiritual advice. It's brilliant right there. Yeah. Subconsciously, they're thinking, so not only do you want me to give up my ego comforts and be all quote spiritual and quote awake, which I don't really feel like doing, and not only do you want me to give up my personal views and convert to your point of view, which makes me feel like I'm rolling over for you, but now you want money from me too?
Yeah.
And he continues, if anything, they subconsciously feel entitled to free spiritual information as some kind of reward for stepping outside their comfort zone and giving you their time, attention.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. That's very predominant unconscious program, so people are not aware of it. The other side of the equation is a poison understanding of money, the idea that's finite, scarce, and hard to come by, that money is the root of all evil. that it's fundamentally materialistic and corrupting, that time is money, therefore you only make money in proportion to the time, energy, sacrifice you put into it. These believe not all how the financial elites of the world perceive it, but which the psychopaths among them have seeded into the culture of the non-elites to serve as a carrot on a stick. Like I mentioned, these are beliefs we have taken on that actually, even what we project against the psychopaths, they have inserted into us to fall into disempower ourselves and fall into victim blame, right?
Yeah.
He continues, all of these must be questioned if you want to deprogram yourself. It's not about selling out and becoming a money-grabbing shyster, but solving the paradox and gaining a higher metaphysical understanding of what's really going on here. For example, the idea that money is scarce and already taken by others, and entrepreneurs know that's false, which is why so many stupid stores and restaurants keep opening up and many succeed. But regardless of that, if you take into account the reality creation principle, you can bend probability, and synchronicity can offset any potential scarcity. Easier said than done, but it goes to show that the poison pills in our subconscious concerning money are themselves the source of poverty, scarcity, more so than the actual reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, just to touch upon, this idea of how to open the flow, I realized that the more that I had, gratitude, the more that I felt I had like abundance in my life, the more that it actually started reflecting financially. So this came from, appreciation, finding, just on a very basic level, this is when I moved to a community and I felt very supported by everyone around me. I also had extreme gratitude. I never felt, I didn't feel the same level of loneliness and isolation that I felt before, although that's kind of, it's kind of the journey of any spiritual path that you are in this alone in your own experience. But I just saw the abundance already in existence, and it was just it was just part of my own reality, and it was really honestly a state of consciousness. And even now, the more that you see that money is something that you have to suffer for and struggle for, and there's not enough, they literally print it, and it's just it's an illusory. The whole banking system is just I don't even get it to begin with. It just seems like the U.S. is billions of dollars in debt. I don't even get how they, obviously I don't have a lack of knowledge there, but to me it also just seems like such a illusory system to begin with, and it's all based on our own belief systems. It's also based on our state of consciousness, and I really feel, the Matrix basically took this kind of rewiring of us. We don't kind of bind together anymore. We compete against each other and exaggerated it to the to the maximum.
And here's the thing: how the Matrix really works. It's not too much that things are being quote unquote done to us. Yes, on a maybe appearance level, but through the mind control, the programming from other forces, the beliefs we have installed within us based on trauma, wounding, the self that we create that reality they want us to create.
Yeah.
In the sense, So, but going to the point you made, that really truly to increase the flow of money, which is energy versus fuel, you must exercise your ability to spend it. The more you spend it, the more you receive. However, that people may say oh my, that makes sense. I've gotten in debt. I don't want, it's not about quote unquote throwing money out of the window and indulging, into materialism or just, you need to do the self work. When you spend something, is it coming something from deep inside because of wounds and trauma, and you just trying to mask it up by looking for material fulfillment?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we see older guys getting into sports cars and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
To each their own. But this material indulgence, as opposed to, is aligned what you mentioned with your true values of something you truly want to do for yourself and helps you to help others, for yourself to have a certain lifestyle that helps you to thrive more on all levels, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and all of that. And versus spending, how do you spend it as well, with what state of mind? Because I noticed as well, like you mentioned, when I was really truly passionate something in bodywork, massage, like I mentioned, took many different workshops at Esalen. It was not cheap, and I had hardly any money. I was really scraping it, but the more I spent into that, it would come back with more clients. I would see the reward, right? It's just the mind is the trickster. Even with food, like for example, the last thing I want to save money on is what goes into my body. So I want high quality food.
Especially these days.
But then people like, oh, Whole Foods is evil. Like, yeah, you can get into all of that. Even at the farmer's market, some stuff, I'm sorry, is more expensive than at Whole Foods, And I'm more happy than support local farmers and all of that. But I also learned when I spend money on something I really need and want, to not spend it in the mindset of like, oh my God, can I really afford this? Shouldn't, you know what I mean? Because that's not, you're not spending it unconditionally, so to speak. If you spend it at the same time worrying, you restrict the flow just to completely give it up and own, this is what I want, this is what I deserve it at this moment. That's what it benefits me. That's what I learned. The universe supports you. Recently, I also, with my work, for example, I need receive body work a few times a month. So I spend $300-400 a month just on receiving body work, right? And my mind, like, can I really afford now? Like, this is what I need. And when I really with this mind state of like, this is what I need to do for myself, so I can become a better force for the divine.
Exactly.
Right? Then the divine universe supports me, and I'm actually getting the means to support that lifestyle.
I just also want to say though, that you're also at a certain point, and this is something I want to touch on too, where it's really these root chakra issues like security, grounding, working on your own stability, your family issues, your early upbringing, knowing how to meet your needs for survival. You're at the point where you can make that choice consciously. But I know for myself, like, this is also directly related, and some people may argue with me, but the more that you have this basic sense of stability and have you worked on your early family childhood issues, this is also what Barry Tessler teaches in her course. It's like, work on your early upbringing, especially your core beliefs around money.
Your first experience around money.
She doesn't get you to bookkeep or do anything until you target these main things, because this is like also like pulling the root out of it. Yeah. And so, that's kind of like, now that you have a certain level of stability in that area, you can make these conscious choices. But when people are in this kind of survival mode, it's like, just work on your root chakra, work on grounding, find a stable home that you feel comfortable with.
The basics.
Even all these basics. And it's not about this not being spiritual. No, this is your foundation for doing work. Like, if you have a comfortable home that you can feel safe in, that you know that you can provide for yourself, then you're going to easily be able to go into these deeper things.
And there's a path towards too, because also, like, in the beginning, I was struggling like anybody else. I had worked, I worked in an animal hospital for $8 an hour cleaning shit out of the cages, to support my music. But I didn't mind doing this because my music passion was the music and all of that. So as long as you have something doing something that gives you joy, passion, that entails also doing the inner work to align with what you truly want to do in life, right? And where's the desire coming from as well? Is this high alignment? And I'm not saying, everybody's different, and people may get upset. Like, I can find this, I'm struggling, I have to pay for, I have a family, I have children. But then you also need to take, a responsibility, because for every decision you made in your life, whatever you got yourself into, that it has consequences.
Yeah. And it is like going back to this thing about, the fall of like our tribal society too, is that I see more than anything, there's a lot of pressure on mothers. It's like, you just have to raise a child on your own. You don't have any aunts and uncles, any relatives around, because everyone's moved all over the place. And so, in order to raise a child these days, you actually have to create your own support systems in that way, and that consciously, because before, like even myself growing up, I had aunts and uncles and grandparents who took care of me. It was a village taking care of me, basically, and not to mention all my neighbors. And now there's a lot of pressure on mothers, and not to say that they, I just want to acknowledge that that's what's happening. But at the same time, it's about like, working against that and being like, okay, I'm going to find a community center. I'm going to find, a group where moms meet or whatever. I'm going to make my own support systems, because I can see that there's a lack of that now. Yeah. So it's almost like we have to work with what we have, in order to create the life that we want. Yeah.
That's also the Matrix, program right now, or agenda of destroying the family unit, right? The quote unquote traditional family, even more so than,
Yeah, and not only that, it's like we, like for myself, I think it was also because in one of, and anyway, I'm giving away a lot of my astrology chart, but basically my North Node is in the 11th house as well. And this is also about community too, and learning how, this is also why the other day I was like, let's go knock on our neighbor's door and go talk to him, because I really see the importance importance, especially since, you know, we live in, there's forest fires going on around us where we are right now. And I want to be able to knock on the neighbor's door and talk to them and not feel afraid of them. And to me, this is also this root chakra thing is like, okay, how do I feel grounded on the earth that I'm on, you know, and how do I feel that safety?
That's true. That's, you know, that's also one of the reasons we have, you know, the membership section of the forum. It's online, but for many, especially with these topics, so many people experience loneliness. They kind of talk about these deeper topics. So especially internationally to meet on the forum, yes, it's limited online, but we just yesterday had the Zoom call again, the group Zoom call. And it's just great to talk to people, right?
Yeah.
You know, on that basic level and then create that kind of community. I'm still like, it gets sketchy. That's a whole other topic about so-called conscious communities, which, you know, based on some sort of ideal, but
this is just about
it helps on a more smaller circle on the personal level, right? But what I want to really get into, because you mentioned also many times astrology in your astrology chart, it's really important because we talked about these inherent beliefs we have, need to question our subconscious, right? But then I'm sure people ask, you know, may ask the questions there, well, how do you justify people living in severe poverty, having no food and shelter, third world countries? And we can see how the matrix works to keep certain countries in poverty on purpose, you know, if there will be equality of, you know, whatever, like everybody would have a conscience in the world, the people in power, nobody would have to live in poverty. However, you know, that's where the mind, because I used to think like this as well, like, you know, the matrix keeps us in, you know, in poverty and all this shit is being done to us, which is true from that level, but we're multidimensional. This goes beyond the mind. And, you know, what do we really know about the person's soul lesson, soul purpose, the karmic lesson, which in the fringe new age, whatever movement, they almost dismiss that now as well. Yeah. So somebody needs to be blamed, right? But even like an astrology chart, like told me, I learned this a lot from you, from what I've worked with astrology, how every situation is so particular when it comes also to karma around abundance and money as well.
Like some people.
And let me to finish that, you know, I don't want to see people starving or people homeless, but what do I really know about this person? How did the person got there? You know, is it just a victim of society? What are the deeper soul lessons, and karmic lessons that's really going on? You know, I don't know that. I hardly still figure my own, and that's not to use this new age excuse, oh, this is just your karma. You know, that's also a distortion of it, but understanding that there are energies at work that goes beyond our comprehension of our little ego mind, right? With this analysis.
Yeah. And I also feel, once again, it's like this, you know, once we started, like if you look at like what would have happened back in hunter-gatherer times when they started birthing agriculture, one person has a really great crop and the next person next to him dies. Like that was this birth of inequality. Like he started hoarding his resources and then the neighbor next to him didn't matter. So this is a whole, and I just want to remark that I feel this is a whole system that needs to be changed, not only on our basic nervous system level and the way that we relate to each other, but like globally as well. And as we actually change our system, then the rest of it will change. But who knows, like as you said, you know, there's people who I think that I really believe that everything is a soul lesson when it comes down to it. And, you know, I also, from my own experience, I've realized that some of the greatest, most traumatic experience in my life, they ended up being gifts. There's a reason why in astrology, Scorpio, the house of death and destruction and of divorce and losing everything, is opposite Taurus, which is a house of abundance and the material world. So we're working with these polarities and we're learning through these polarities always. So who knows, you know, what someone's soul lesson is. But I think what I would actually, if someone brings up that question, you know, because it's not so much about them being really concerned about people living in poverty. It's like, what is it that's getting triggered in themselves when you bring up these topics? Because anytime someone tries to make it about something out there, it's actually because something is going on for them that they don't know how to express. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then also falling, you know, into the self-righteous thing, you know, like, you know, where people use a lot of this activism or what do you call it, philanthropy? You know, and Sherbina was very critical of that philanthropy, almost like the ego's sly maneuver, you know, to avoid your own process by, making yourself feel better that you're helping others.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't mean to be selfish in its own, but understanding deeper processes, on the basic psychological, unconscious level, the programs have the beliefs we never question, then on a somatic, emotional level to a karmic level, and ultimately, on a spiritual level to bring it back to the divine, to understand like who owns money. It's neither owned by the banks, whatever, and also not falling this hoarding, this possession, this is mine, but giving it under to surrender to the divine, right? That you're just an instrument and how you can use it in alignment with the divine, your higher self, but you never, claim it, so to speak,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing is I think you can have a healthy non-attachment to money and just see this is in the amount of fuel that I have right now that I can decide on how to, invest it. And when you have a lack of fuel, you have this lack of energy to do the things that you want to do. And I think this is also why I think it was Chong'en Trungpa. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Chong'en Trungpa because Reggie Ray was telling this story about how he wanted to teach these advanced Tibetan Buddhist practices to Westerners, and the whole institution was like, no, you can't do that. They're not ready for it. And he was like, no, because Westerners have this basic level of material security, they're actually really ready to do the work. Whereas in Tibet, it's like they're struggling on a basic level, So we are ready for these things, but it's also getting ourselves out of the mindset too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we are ready to take on these spiritual teachings if we're not in this scarcity consciousness,
Exactly.
And we're able to, and really just figure out how can I feel like a basic level of safety in a home, and then that's your spiritual work,
That's already spiritual work, Sometimes I can see myself. We try to put the cart in front of the horse or spiritual bypass and try to go to faster, higher levels where we need to just work on the foundation. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it in my article, in my recent essay, The Necessity to Surrender to the Divine and Spiritualize the Being, the fourfold approach on all levels, right? The physical, the foundation, the emotional, the psychological, the spiritual. It also needs to work together, but you need to have that foundation, right? And essentially, it goes back to what we mentioned at the beginning because it all ties into the matrix temptation of wealth, sex, and power, which are not bad in themselves, just how even sex itself, there's a higher creative force behind it. And power can also give you not power over others or feeding off of fame and all of that. The narcissistic ego ties into that or hijacks all of that, but to use it to be a force of change to help others in the world as well, But what happens that, from the occult perspective or the integral yoga perspective, that the human ego is highly attracted to wealth, sex, and power, and then the occult forces hijack it, and then people are being actually controlled or possessed by money, sex, and power instead of controlling them instead of them controlling it without the attachment. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So in service to the divine. So the aesthetic spiritual distortion or rejection of the material world then is the other extreme. And to finish it off, the first hour, with this quote from Sri Aurobindo, what I just mentioned, about money, sex, and power, specifically money. He writes, "Money is the visible sign of the universal force, and this force in its manifestation on earth works on the vital and physical planes and is indispensable to the fullness of the outer life. In its origin and its true action, it belongs to the divine, but like other powers of the divine, it is delegated here and in the ignorance of the lower nature can be usurped for the uses of the ego or held by asuric occult force influences and perverted to their purpose. This is indeed one of the three forces, power, wealth, sex, that have the strongest attraction to the human ego and the asura occult forces and are most generally misheld and misused by those who retain them. The seekers or keepers of wealth are more often possessed than rather its possessors. Few escape entirely a certain distortion influence stamped on it by its long seizure and perversion by the asura. For this reason, most spiritual disciplines insist on the complete self-control, detachment, and renunciation of all bondage to wealth and all of personal egoistic desire for its possession. Some even put a ban on money and riches and proclaim poverty and bareness of life as the only spiritual condition. But this is an error. it leaves the power in the hands of the hostile forces. To reconquer it for the divine to whom it belongs and use it divinely for the divine life is the supramental way for the sadhaka. You must neither turn with an aesthetic shrinking from the money power, the means it gives and the object it brings, nor cherish a rajasic attachment for them or a spirit of enslaving self-indulgence in their gratifications. Regard wealth simply as a power to be won back for the Divine Mother and placed at her service. All wealth belongs to the divine, and those who hold it are trustees, not possessors. It is with them today, tomorrow it might be elsewhere. All depends on the way they discharge their trust while it is with them, in what spirit, in what consciousness, in their use of it, and to what purpose. Mm-hmm. And that also ties into what we mentioned before. We can go more into the second hour, that money is not to be hoarded, it's meant to circulate constantly. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so please join us for the second hour. We're getting into more topics. I definitely want to talk more about this idea of like fear, trauma, scarcity, because that's something that I struggled with quite a bit, and our own personal experiences living in scarcity. Also, I really want to touch on this idea of like charge what you're worth, and then also we can talk about people who do charge really high rates and claim it's because of an abundance mindset. So how, once again,
the distortion of that.
There's distortion on distortion on distortion. And also just this illusion of things costing more, therefore it must be better. I have a bunch of examples for that. So yeah, please join us on the second hour.
Exactly. We want to give more practical advice and share more of our own experiences. And then, if you're not already a member, you can sign up at veilofreality.com if you like to invest. And also have access to the forum where we have, many discussions also about this topic in way more depth. See you guys at the second hour.